next, I'd like to introduce Victor Barnes. Victor, thank you so much for joining us. He is the Director of Programs and Grants at Rotary International, which adds to a long list of career steps of service that began as a PCV in the Democratic of Congo, formerly known as Zaire. And you seem to have a lot in common with the AIDS, HIV folks that have been working in Africa. But today we hope that you can talk a little bit about the Peace Corps Rotary partnership and what it means, and get us all inspired for next.
Sure, thanks, Kim, and thanks for the introduction. Just since there are a number of people on this call that I don't know, I thought it might be helpful just to give you a little sense of my background very briefly, given that time is short, and then talk specifically about this particular partnership and why it's an important partnership for me personally, as well as an important partnership for Rotary. As Kim mentioned, I was a Peace Corps volunteer from 1975 through 1977 in Zaire. It was a year after Mobutu was installed to a leadership function in Zaire. It was a very tumultuous time in the country, and I was in the education sector and really experienced in the southern part of the country, in a part of the country called Katanga, which was trying to secede from Zaire at the time because they were the wealth base for the country. So it was quite interesting. We were evacuated twice because of incursions from neighboring countries, and it was a great opportunity to sort of test your personal mettle and to understand the value that you as an individual and you as part of a community brought to the community, and particularly in this case to the educational systems and to the students who were really trying to thrive in an environment that was really challenging. So it was, needless to say, an extremely formative part of my early career. It led me out of a career in the arts into a master's degree at UCLA in African Studies, and then a doctoral degree at Stanford in international development education. And I went directly from there to State Department at USAID, and ultimately moved from education to public health as the first program director for HIV/AIDS interventions, and led a 10-year program at USAID, the first program at USAID, trying to address the epidemic. And as your colleague was articulating the situation in Malawi, we were at the very front end of trying to grapple with the lack of any kinds of medications and initiating behavior change interventions around behaviors that people rarely even admitted. And when they did admit sexual contact, they frequently weren't telling the truth. So it was a really challenging environment to work in, but one in which you really understood the power of the relationship with the community. And that's where I think this particular partnership thrives, because we have two organizations whose sort of kindred spirit is the mobilization of communities and interactions with communities with the intent of doing good in that community. And I think where Peace Corps and where Rotary intersect in those activities is really the sort of the sweet spot of this relationship. And you better than I know the opportunities for how that plays out in terms of supporting community-based projects and in strengthening and mobilizing communities, in being able to help community members advocate for themselves at various levels of importance within, not only within their immediate communities, but within the governance structures that impact their access to clean water, to medical care, to education, and all of the sort of primary functions that are necessary for people to achieve and to thrive during their lifetimes. And so I think that the opportunity of this program just only continues to grow as we become more sort of comfortable with our independent bureaucracies and how we interact around those bureaucracies, and begin to understand the way in which we can best leverage the resources that Rotarians bring to the table, and how those interface with the work that volunteers do, Peace Corps volunteers do in their day-to-day activities at the country level. I was heartened to hear the comments of some of the new board members around not only the use of podcasts and video webinars and the like to create opportunities for those kinds of discussions, and having a richer understanding of what Peace Corps volunteers and Rotarians can do together, but the idea of identifying skills within Rotarians at a localized level, which is something that we're doing sort of across the board at Rotary, is a really critical piece of information that allows for a much more fine-tuned approach to the collaboration between Rotarians and Peace Corps volunteers, and one that I would heartily endorse. I was also surprised to hear that there's a district Rotary Peace Corps liaison. I don't know if that's a standardized position across districts or individual to yours, but I love the idea. I probably will get chastised at Rotary for suggesting the creation of yet another district position, but I think there's some really important opportunities there. We have also district international service chairs, which are really intended to be resources within districts that help align the resources of Rotarians with the work at the community level within the district. And so I could see where that liaison position could interact with the district international service chairs in a really useful way around identifying resource bases for Rotarians as we move forward. I also want to just touch on a couple of things. Rotary is highly engaged at the moment in moving our strategic action plan forward and making sure that that permeates all of the work that Rotary has done. And in the past 8 years that I've been at Rotary, this is the most significant penetration of the Rotary strategic action plan throughout the portfolio of of what Rotary is doing, both on the foundation side and on the secretariat side. And I think that the Peace Corps Rotary partnership represents sort of three opportunities for important elements of the strategic plan in terms of helping to implement those programs. One is impact. So the buzzword around Rotary right now, everyone's talking about impact. Everyone has a different perspective of what impact is. But I think in the case of this relationship, what becomes really important for Rotary and for Peace Corps to understand is that the value of having these organizations on the ground and being part of a community allows Rotary to have a much more in-depth understanding of not only the needs of that community, but what kinds of services those communities need in order for the activities of Rotary and the activities of Peace Corps to ultimately have an outcome that would have a long-term impact on those communities. And so the ability for us to be the voices of those communities at various levels of importance, whether it's at the community level with chiefs in villages, or whether it's with the Ministry of Health around access to healthcare around HIV/AIDS or malaria or HPV or hepatitis, any of a multitude of issues that affect many of these countries that both Peace Corps and Rotary work in, becomes a really critical piece of the puzzle in terms of Rotary establishing its capacity to report impact. I think the second area where we have real value in this partnership is really expanding our reach. And that really speaks to Rotary having the ability to penetrate communities in a way that allows for members of those communities, again, to have an augmented voice in the work that both Rotary is doing, and quite frankly, in the work that Peace Corps is doing. So I think it's the essence of this relationship in terms of expanding the breadth of the two organizations. So when it comes to when 1 + 1, two organizations coming together, and you have the parts are greater than the whole is greater than the parts. And I think that this is a great example of that. And then finally, for Rotary, enhancing the participant engagement. I mean, again, this is an ideal opportunity for Rotarians on the ground, and even Rotarians who aren't in those communities in which these activities are taking place. It's an excellent opportunity for Rotarians to have an enhanced experience around the work that they want to do, whether it's international service, community work, or district grants, global grants, or even in some cases, as we expand to programs of scale, opportunities for these kinds of relationships to play into the implementations of programs of scale become really, really important. And just one final note, I just want to do a shout out to the work that Peace Corps was doing during the COVID, during and continuing COVID pandemic around their virtual service and the implementation of that pilot activity. I think it's a huge opportunity for both Peace Corps and Rotary to begin to think about post-pandemic, how does this kind of interaction allow us greater flexibility and greater opportunity to include more and more individuals in the process of engaging communities via virtual activities, via virtual interventions, and particularly when you have the combination of individuals on the ground and the capacity to also engage other individuals virtually. I'm thinking, for example, that Quentin Wooden of the World Bank has an e-club, excuse me, in Washington, D.C., based in Washington, D.C., of international development specialists around the world. And the idea of being able to sort of link some of those conversations with those e-clubs, or that e-club in particular, or the e-club that deals with refugees, for example, and this particular group and the work that Rotary and Rotarians are doing in that international development space, and particularly in the refugee space, makes for a really exciting sort of future for this program. And so with that, I'm just going to sort of bring my comments to an end. Happy to answer any questions if there's time. I'm not sure what the schedule will allow.